In today's video, we have some updated NHL trade talk on teams like the Tampa Bay Lightning as well as the New York Rangers, and we have some potential formats for the 2021 NHL playoffs should the season be able to get up and running. We'll discuss all the latest news coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. Now, as I mentioned, we have a few things to talk about today. It's a relatively light news day. Of course, I want to wish a happy Thanksgiving to all of our U.S. friends and followers and subscribers. Obviously, a big day in the U.S., and I hope you're all having a terrific day spending time with your family. Obviously, let's jump now into today's news. Let's kick things off with the Tampa Bay Lightning. Now, of course, we saw a pretty significant signing yesterday in Mikhail Sergachev, their RFA defenseman, signed a 3-year contract at $4.8 million. Obviously, it puts them officially over the cap now, so they are going to be forced to make a trade. As I mentioned before, if they wouldn't have signed Sergachev or Cirelli or Chernak, they could have been under the cap limit, and obviously if they had a hard time trading other players, then it would have been the RFA players that would have been basically forced to sit and wait until they had enough space to sign them. So clearly that is not going to be the case. Remarks from Julien Brisebois do indicate that the contract talks with Cirelli and Chernak are progressing. And he said he has a lot of balls in the air, according to athletic reporter Joe Smith, who interviewed Brisebois recently after the Sergachev signing, indicating that, obviously he acknowledged that he has to move players out. He's not going to have any choice in the matter. And there's a lot of things kind of up in the air right now, and decisions are trying to be made. So obviously that leads us to think that maybe they're getting closer to making a trade, and they do need to trade out a significant salary to be cap compliant. And you have to wonder, if it boils down to it, would they possibly be forced to trade Anthony Cirelli? I mean, you wouldn't think that they would. Obviously don't want to. I'm sure they don't. But at the same time, will they be able to, because of all the no trade clauses they've given out or modified no trades, that there's not a lot of options here. They need the players to work with them and basically agree to be traded in order to really make much headway in getting this looked after. Now, in the case of Tyler Johnson, is a prime example, was a full no trade. Tried putting them through waivers before. They're going to have to give up some pretty, interesting, valuable assets as an addition to any of these guys being moved out, just to have players take that on. Now, there was word that a guy like Johnson had given them a handful of teams to work with before, but at this point, nothing's been able to be worked out. Would not be completely shocked if a team like Detroit got involved, given the familiarity of GM Steve Yzerman, who knows most of these players and was involved with drafting them and signing them to their early contracts before moving on to be the GM back with Detroit. And obviously, Brisebois and Yzerman are quite familiar with each other as well, so I'm sure they talk a lot of business on a regular basis. I mean, whether or not it's Johnson or Killorn, there's been talk Yanni Gourde's name has been out there, but to some degree, they all have some kind of say in their trade destinations based on their contract clauses that have been given here. So, I mean, we'll have to see what the Lightning end up doing to become cap compliant, but I know there's a lot of teams out there that would love to get their hands on a guy like Anthony Cirelli, who has more value, in my opinion, than some of the other guys that they need to or kind of want to move out here, like a Johnson, for example. The team like the Winnipeg Jets would love to have a guy like Cirelli who could be that number 2 center. That would be a huge gain for a team like the Jets. I mean, I know there's even other teams in the East and Western Conference, too, that have been linked to having interest. Doesn't mean that there's actually trade talks have taken place, but I know if a guy like Cirelli was available, there would be a ton of interest, and they might actually get better value. But it's just, obviously, there's such a deep team that, fortunately for them, no matter who they move out, they're probably not going to be drastically weaker. And I guess, unfortunately, for their Eastern Conference counterparts, that's bad news for them, because even though they would be slightly weakened and have a decent piece moved on, there's still so many weapons there in Tampa, and none of them are going too far anytime soon. I mean, there was a lot of talk about Stamkos maybe being moved, but he's not going to waive. I mean, he's got a big-time contract. I'm captain. He's not going to waive to leave Florida. That's just not going to happen. Now, as I mentioned as well, I wanted to take a quick look here at the New York Rangers. I came across some interesting and yet surprising trade talk revolving young prospect Vitaly Kravtsov. Now, I first got wind of this from fellow YouTuber Wardy NHL. I caught Tyler talking about it on his channel. So, of course, I found that interesting, so I looked into it a little bit further, found an article from foreverblueshirts.com referencing an interview conducted here with Kravtsov over in Russia, where he was being asked about the trade rumors linking him to the Pittsburgh Penguins, which was rather odd and interesting. So I tried doing some research, digging around the internet, trying to see what I could find. I could not find anything outside of this interview being the only point of reference to indicate that there was any talk. Now, of course, when he was asked about it, he really didn't comment on it. He didn't really want to get into it. He was also asked if he had if he saw himself with a future with the Rangers organization. Didn't really get into that either. Didn't really want to answer those types of questions. Basically said that, right now he's under contract to play in Russia. That's what he's focused on. And he'll head back, to New York when the time is right. So it's quite possible, given everything, that he very well could stay and play out the season in Russia. And I would think that we won't see much of any, if possibly even no, NHL time for the coming year. It's really hard to say because we don't know how the season is going to work and all that yet, waiting and all that. But clearly, it kind of makes sense that for Kravtsov's case and the Rangers camp and the bonus overages they already have to deal with, that he likely plays in Russia this year. So where these rumors are coming from to link him to Pittsburgh is really difficult to say. I mean, the Rangers have had other players on the trade block, which ended up getting signed, like D'Angelo and Strome were the main ones being referenced in a lot of NHL trade rumors throughout the offseason. There was a lot of debate whether or not they would be signed or traded. And I still question both of their futures, longer term at least, with the Rangers organization. But at the same time, they are signed right now. And right now I'm not sure that the Rangers are going to be doing a whole lot of moves, at least leading into the season. I think they will possibly make some trades throughout or during the deadline. It also is going to depend on how the season goes, because they do have some more questions to be answered and decisions to be made on players for beyond next season. The only part that kind of makes sense is what Tyler touched on in his video as well, just talking about the fact that the Rangers have built up some really good depth on the wings, and clearly Kravtsov is going to likely be a left winger, possibly a right winger at the NHL level. Now he shoots left, but he is listed as a right winger, so he could probably play either side. Maybe if he plays the right side, he might stand a better chance. But I mean, on the left side, when you've got Artemi Panarin, and you've got Chris Kreider, and you've got a guy like Alexis Lafreniere coming in, you've also got Capo Caco, on the other side, and you have Buchnevich, who's difficult to say what his future holds with the team, and then obviously a guy like Kravtsov. You have some other guys like a Julien Gauthier trying to find his way, Brendan Lemieux, so. Will he have a difficult time finding a roster spot? He's going to have, not an easy time by any means. Kravtsov's a pretty solid-looking prospect, but they have a lot of other younger players as well. Some pretty solid guys on long-term contracts on the wings. So it's not going to be an easy task. And I guess it's possible that the Rangers have done such a great job drafting that maybe they do move him. It's difficult to say, but at this point, I don't think they would be moving him that prematurely. I mean, he can play in Russia. He's not going to be on their NHL roster immediately anyway, so clearly it's not a situation they really need to deal with. And to a division rival of that in Pittsburgh just doesn't really make a lot of sense. Found it interesting, but I want to talk about it here today in case anybody came across this news with the Rangers possibly moving one of their prize prospects here, Vitaly Kravtsov. But I found this very surprising. I don't see there being anything to it, and it's a situation I will be kind of monitoring and watching a little closely to see if any more information emerges on this. But let me know down in the comments, do you see the Rangers maybe considering the fact that they have so much depth on the wings and other great prospects in their system, that would they move Kravtsov at this point? I would think it's a little early for that, but let me know what you think down in the comments and we'll discuss further. Now, another quick update as well on Flyers defenseman Samuel Morin, who's been in the system now for some time, but has really had a really bad luck time when it comes to injuries. He's only played about 30 games in the past 3 years, and more of them in the AHL than the NHL. Battled numerous surgeries, had a lot of bad luck with his knees. He's a big, imposing 6'6" defenseman, and ultimately ended up getting passed in the depth charts over the last 2 or 3 years by guys like Myers and Sanheim and all these younger defensemen coming up and grabbing spots because he just hasn't been able to play and stay healthy. But there is word that he finally got everything under control and that he should be expected to play this season. But as head coach Alain Vigneault said, he really needs to have a solid season in the American Hockey League for at least half to 3/4 of a season, a good solid 50, 60 games under his belt, stay healthy, build some consistency, and see where things go before they can really give him an NHL opportunity. But for a guy that was, a promising looking, really massive defensive prospect here just a few years back, it's been unfortunate to see what has transpired through him, all these injuries. And we'll see if he can battle back and end up regaining any hope for his NHL career. But he is going to play. He did think about hanging him up and giving up on this because he's gone through so much in the last few years. Apparently he was close to quitting and saying he was retired. But he's going to give it another shot this year, see if he can stay healthy. And we'll see where this goes. Now, Pierre LeBrun of The Athletic has an article out as well talking about some potential playoff formats we might see, assuming the NHL and the PA can get their agreement in place for the 2021 NHL season. It's all been quiet here for about almost a week, which is, eerily quiet. It's not a good thing from a fan's perspective when you want to hear some good news that something's going to be able to happen here. It's not really good at all because there's just no news is bad news at this point in time. When you're hearing teams that are having multiple COVID cases, like we saw with Vegas and Columbus, we saw Team Canada, the World Juniors, have to shut things down for a couple weeks for their selection camp. It's tough to see right now that we might have to wait a little longer for hockey, and I do think there is reason to believe that the season could possibly be in jeopardy. But let's look at something a little bit more fun, a little bit more optimistic here, that if everything can come together and have a season, that due to the realigned divisions, we could see some very different looking playoff formats. So for example, the article discusses the possibility where they're going to be having 4 different looking divisions, that they do a simple format that they used to do years back, and do a top 4 teams in each division make the playoffs, and do a 1 through 4 format. Obviously, once we get beyond the divisional playoffs, they'd have to go to like a conference type final, and they'd have to figure out which divisions would play which other ones and so on, and kind of work your way that way. You could also put 2 divisions in each conference like we have now, East and West. So maybe you take the Canadian division and the Western, for example, make that one conference, and then get your Eastern and your Central/Southern be your other conference, and then do like a 1 through 8 format, which is something we've seen before. Or, you know what, one NHL executive even mentioned as well, like considering how messed up and different everything was going to be, maybe you get really wild and crazy and do something that's a little bit different. And again, the geographical standpoint for everything is going to be different anyway. Maybe they just say the top 16 teams make the playoffs, and you go 16 all the way up to 1 versus 16, 2 versus 15, 3 versus 14, and so on. And then just reseed at the beginning of each round until you have a Stanley Cup winner. That would be something that I know we've talked about before and you've heard about. Sounds like a crazy idea, but it could be fun. You get some really different playoff matchups, and it might be something that they're worth consider doing. Obviously at this point, I'm sure they have multiple scenarios on the table, and there's many other obstacles that are probably more important right now that they need to come up with and overcome before they can even really settle on that format, because we got to get to a regular season first before the playoffs are even a reality. So let me know your thoughts on everything we discussed here today down in the comments, and we'll discuss further. If you're new to the channel, consider subscribing and turning on your notifications so you don't miss any future content. And give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it. I'd appreciate it if you did. As always, thank you for watching, and I'll catch you next time.